to start over. Welcome to all of our guild members, and we have some guests, I know, because they asked us for the link, and we welcome you to our guild. I first heard about Woolpunk, and that is her trademarked name that she uses. So we will not reveal her real name. When I first heard about her when Margaret and I were meeting at the dairy, and we were talking to the curator about using their space, and we asked him for ideas for speakers. And he said, "Oh, you got to get Woolpunk." Because I told him how we were interested in community engagement and social issues, as well as beautifully made things. So she and I started talking, and we are delighted she's back here with us today. Yesterday's talk was exciting and invigorating. She's beaming in from New Jersey. She has a day job that she will tell you about if she wants to, that also is kind of art related. But most of her work that we're going to see, she does in her spare time. She has both a bachelor's and a master's from Rutgers. Her work, as Joanne commented, is focused around making beautiful things around social issues. So we're going to hear about those tonight. We saw some of them yesterday, and the mass shooting one really struck me because we had one 3 blocks from us not that long ago, and so that work is very powerful. So I'm going to be quiet and turn this over to New Jersey.
Thank you so much, Jane and Elizabeth. I really appreciate being here and the interest in my work. It's very honoring, and I appreciate it. Some of the slides, if you came yesterday, will be a slight repeat, but I'm focusing today on community engagement, and that is my technique that we'll be talking about. What is this Woolpunk, this Scooby-Doo mystery that we keep hearing about here? And I'm going to share a little bit about that more tonight, and I hope you find this engaging. So about 10 or 11 years ago, I found myself unwed, though I was wed. And during this time, I had never truly shown as with my maiden name. I got married young and went to graduate school and started showing. And I was always using the term Woolpunk Studios. And that is because one of my friends, who is a sound artist, one day we were walking and he said to me, "You know, you're really not a knitter." And I'm like, "I'm not?" And he's like, "No, you're not." And he's like, "You're more punk. You're like Woolpunk." And I was like, all right, I'm totally stealing that, and that's going to be me from now on. So I had been using it creatively since 2004, but when there was a time where my identity was shifting and I wanted a space where in my head, if I had nothing else, I could still be an artist and still feel like an artist. And I created Woolpunk because that allowed me the space to say that my art was important to me and my time as an artist was important. And it also, I love Woolpunk. Like sometimes in my day job, or if I'm home and like somebody says something and it's like a little bit off and it makes me a little frustrated, I think like in my head, Woolpunk wouldn't take that. Woolpunk would say something, but Michelle, I mean, my name is like somewhat boring. So, in my regular life. And so Woolpunk kind of empowers me to be more creative, and I'm okay with that. I'm supporting myself by calling myself this, and I'm trademarked through my unique stitching, and if I don't use it, it will be taken away. So I appreciate that the Hand Weavers Guild has acknowledged that I use this and have been calling me it. And I really appreciate it. I always appreciate it when people call me Woolpunk. So Woolpunk here in a verb. So I'm the noun, and Woolpunk as a verb is to create fibrous works using a variety of traditional craft skills that some consider low level, like finger knitting, to produce unpredictable, sometimes large scale ideas that bring different materials, techniques, and community together in the name of art and whatnot. And here you're seeing one of my pieces, a detailed called Waterfalls. And this was made around the time that I started really embracing myself as an artist. And in 2009, and I was going through that time where my identity was shifting. And I feel like this is probably, I was always a little punk, but this was really one of the first pieces where I'm like, yeah, that's me. That's Woolpunk. And you'll see that there is, it was based on a waterfall. The yarn is silver, it's silver paper dipped, it's paper dipped in silver wrapped around a polyfiber. I knit on a knitting machine, and this piece killed my knitting machine. I broke more needles than I ever wanted to. And I collected garbage while I was visiting waterfalls and waterways, trying to just become stimulated for the piece. And I started to see water as not so pristine and lovely as I once did. And this was before the BP oil spill, and the piece is shown in so many places: St. John the Divine Cathedral, Art Fair 14C, to name a few. Okay, next slide, please. So that's me on the left where the arrow is, and that's me about 5 hours from where you are in Colorado on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. And I volunteered my whole life. I grew up with not a lot of money, and in some points in my life, and so much so that my brother had to have a paper route so we could eat. And during this time, I remembered my cousin gave me a ski jacket, and you probably all really cherish ski jackets. And I just thought it was this interesting concept that, like, I didn't even have like a regular jacket, and my cousin gave me a ski jacket. Like, she had an extra jacket just to ski in, and it was blue and green and white, and it made me feel like so happy to have it. And I think that spirit has carried me like to this point in my work, where if I have something and somebody doesn't, or somebody needs something, I want to be part of the team that's correcting that, and that's giving that person dignity and respect, and humanizing people that may be financially challenged, may be houseless, may have foreclosed homes, whatever the case may be. And so, I always volunteered, and then have worked in not-for-profits pretty much my whole life, either as a teacher, a museum worker. Here on the right is my team from the United Way, where I worked. I was the community outreach and marketing manager for the United Way for many years. And I also worked for Garden State Episcopal, that ran a homeless shelter. So these are just some things that I think really are important when you look at my work, to know that I'm not somebody who I feel could be using people to better my art career. It's just really who I am. Next slide. So in 2007, I was a teaching artist at the Jersey City Museum. And I don't know if, I realized I spelled the word stitch wrong there, excuse me. I don't know if I started the term stitching, but I wanted to have people stitching. And I don't think I started it, but I can't remember where I heard it from. And so we had Sabrina Gashwander as a speaker. I proposed the program to the museum, and she concentrated on women's work, and she gave a lecture about how knitting has been passed from generation to generation. And many times women would knit socks for soldiers, and so on and so on. And it was an amazing event. If you don't know who Sabrina Gashwander is, you should look her up. She had a zine called Knit Knit. She was, I think the birth of her career happened in Brooklyn, but she's now out in Los Angeles, represented by a gallery. And in the left-hand corner is Sheila Pepe, who many of you may know her work. She crochets a lot of times unconventional materials like shoelaces and such, and she's an all-star when it comes to the knitting scene. Next slide. And so through the years after having the stitch in at the Jersey City Museum, I think I held another one in 2009. And I started working at the United Way in, I want to say 2011. And when Superstorm Sandy hit New Jersey, our homeless population, or our houseless population, increased 16%. And I know this because I was working for the United Way, and New Jersey follows this HUD program called point in time count. And usually it's the coldest month. It happens in February, where people go out and they try and recognize houseless people in the community. And the number was shocking. I remember my office was really upset that it went up 16%. And a lot of the local advocacy groups started to really try to work together and resolve the issue. And so the United Way, along with other groups, started the Hudson County Long-Term Recovery Committee. And I was the executive secretary there. And I was involved in a lot of FEMA recovery funds and working with local people to make sure that they could still live in Hudson County and their homes could be fixed. Hudson County was the third worst county hit in Hurricane Sandy. And I'm sure you probably have heard about Hurricane Sandy. It was an unbelievable time. I personally was without electricity for 2 weeks, maybe even 3. There were people who had electricity, their towns were out for months. So, it was a time that New Jersey came together, and in my own way, I thought this was a way I could help. It didn't really hit me until we had an event called The Longest Night. And The Longest Night recognizes houseless and homeless people in Hudson County. And they were giving out blankets. And I thought this was just so odd that the blankets were being given out, because as well as I do, is these blankets go outside, as many homeless and houseless people do, even though they live in shelters. They can't stay in the shelter 24 hours a day. These blankets would get wet and they would smell. And so I wanted to create something special. I wanted the blanket to feel like a home. And I also wanted the blanket to have an inserted pillow and a pocket for safety, because theft is common in shelters, and just have a place for people to put their belongings. And I thought if I created a blanket so beautiful, this is all DIY materials, by the way, like I recycled everything. Some of these are scarves, some of these are pot holders. I just threw everything on the table and created this blanket. And I thought if I made something so special that people would be jealous of houseless people using the blankets. And that really was the goal. And it really wasn't until, can I have the next slide? It wasn't really until I met, I was with Midori Yoshimoto from NJCU, and she did a show called Jerseyscapes at New Jersey City University. And we were at a party, and she's like, Michelle, she's like, what are you doing, art-wise? And I'm like, I'm not making art right now. Because remember, this is in 2014. This wasn't really a time where community engagement was even really, I think, a big thing. It was I didn't even know what to call it. I just knew that it wasn't art that I typically made. And she said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm trying to make blankets for like houseless people who are suffering from the hurricane. And she said, okay, I want to show it. And I said, no. And she said, yes. And I said, okay. So she showed it. And from there, it just kind of blossomed. Next slide, please. And before I knew it, the Jersey City Artist Studio Tour wanted to have it on the pier. So I created another one for people to learn about the project. And every time I showed one, more and more enthusiasm built. And that to me was surprising. I knew people were upset about houseless and homeless people, but I just didn't realize that everybody felt like how I felt. that we felt helpless as a society, as a first world country, that we have such, had such have such a problem with meeting basic needs for many individuals, and that people really wanted to help. And I feel like in this particular project that I became a vehicle for people, or a vessel, in a lot of ways, and that the project came through me. It wasn't me, and it wasn't an ego. It was like I just connected all the dots that were already there, already in place. Next slide, please. So each blanket, like I said, sometimes I stitched the pillow, sometimes there'd be a pocket for the pillow, and there would be a tarp that would come with the blanket. And all of this was supposed to be DIY. The eventual goal was that if somebody in a shelter wanted to redesign a blanket, that they could go to the shelters, usually like Perk Shelter has a thrift store, the United Way had a thrift store. So it wouldn't be out of the norm for someone in the shelter to go down, get some blankets and stitch it together so that they could recreate for their child or just give themselves a new blanket. I didn't want it to be anything expensive. And that was the goal. Next slide, please. So, like I said, I put this together, and things just kind of started to happen. Somebody connected me to the local homeless advocacy group, JC Hag, and they backed me, and they said, Michelle, I think we need to have some community help with this. Like, I think it'd be great. And I said, okay, that sounds great, because the goal was to make 16 blankets to represent the 16%. Like, I really wanted people to digest how much our homeless population had increased in just 1 year. And you'll see from this was our first stitch-in, and that, there were many different people, all ages, all religions, participating. It was open to the public, it was free. And I was really like not descriptive. I was like, we're having a stitch-in, come stitch with me. And people brought their yarn. On the right top hand corner, you'll see that the homeless advocacy group brought the rice bags that they also feed the homeless, and asked if we could make tarps from them. And I was trying to run them through sewing machines, but it was breaking things. So we just used them to do pillows. But it was a real, like, people brought sewing machines, people donated blankets. You can see in the bottom right hand corner, my mother was teaching everybody how to knit. My daughter was learning how to knit. That's my little daughter in the front there. And it was really like a beautiful day. And then NJ.com came, we were on the news, and it kind of started to unfold and become a real something bigger than I ever expected. Next slide. That's my mother teaching people. She was teaching people how to knit that day. Next slide. That's my oldest daughter, Abby, and my youngest daughter, Charlotte. They brought their friends, and they were knitting. It was really lovely. Next slide. And then the program grew. I'm sorry, it's a little blurry. I tried to, finding these images from 10 years ago is quite a trick. But the programs grew. Very celebrated artists like Carol Westfall. She was a famous fiber artist. And she's a professor at Montclair State University. She got on board. You can see her pillows are like gorgeous that are attached to the quilted blankets. She was adding fleece and lining. I mean, they got really sophisticated, some of the blankets. And then on the right-hand side is Angela McKnight, who's now one of our New Jersey senators. But at the time, she ran a group called Angela Cares for seniors. And I did a stitch-in at the Montclair Library. I also worked with Be the Change at Keene University. I worked at some local shelters. We had employees stitching. So it became a huge event. It was advertised even on a radio station. And I don't know how I learned that I can't remember how I learned that it was on a radio station, but the radio station was announcing the wrong dates. And so I called the radio station, and then they accused me of trying to like get free programming out of, and I was like, I'm not trying to get free programming. I just want to make sure you say the right date. It just like some DJ went rogue and started announcing the Gimme Shelter project dates. And it was really like push pause, did a video on it, and then it ended up at Parsons School of Design, where I was the third project they talked about calling Integrated in Communities. And it was really, I just was honored by all of it, really touched and humbled that so many people said yes. You know, they dropped what they were doing and they came and they helped and they stitched, and everybody came with a lot of enthusiasm. And it just shows, you know, when America can get behind something, what a difference we can make. Next slide, please. This is me at the end. You know, what I think keeps my projects maybe a little bit different from other engagements is that I really try to be respectful. Coming from the United Way and other places, I'd like to keep everybody's dignity intact and treat people like human beings. And so nobody was photographed with the blanket on, or, you know, even when we gave the blanks, it was optional for people to take. We didn't force anybody to take them. They were all used. And I just am really proud of that fact, because a lot of times when I see community engagement, many times it just seems like it's for the people who are doing it and not the people receiving it. And in my projects, it's really about the people receiving it, and less about, I feel, me or the people doing it. We are, again, just vehicles or vessels that are navigating and connecting the needs to the wants. And if you think about what not-for-profits are in America, you know, not-for-profits are started because the government can't help well, they say they can't help everyone all the time, right? But, you know, so not-for-profits, that's part of the goal, is to reach people and ask for help. And you know, I think that's the spirit of the Gimme Shelter project, for sure. Next slide, please. So I didn't want to make a career out of off of homelessness or houselessness, because I really do care, and I feel like, you know, we don't want to, you know, be exploitive in any way. And I also, it was a lot. I'm a single mom. I had to sleep with blankets on the side of my bed. Like, I had a big double bed, and one side was donated to, it was like all blankets that people were donating. So like, and I don't have a studio, so I really want, the next time I did it, I just felt like it had to be the right scenario. And people still, for several years, were inviting me. They were still hosting stitch-ins on their own. They were still making blankets with pockets and pillows. And I loved all of it, but I didn't want to champion it until it was the right moment. And I found the right moment this year, which I'll go into next. But we have a virtual info meetup on February 20th at 7:30 p.m. And I spoke with Jane and Elizabeth, and I wanted to invite, if the guild wants to be a part of it, at least virtually. And you can find out more information at our meetup. I would love this to be a national thing, not because I need Woolpunk to be national, but just, you can even go to your own, you can make blankets, you can make whatever it is, you can find your own organization, and then you can donate locally to whoever you want to donate to. So we'd love to have you be a part of it, and you can be what we call a community champion. And those are people who are giving back, who are taking the time to realize the needs of the community, and in a selfless way. Next slide, please. And that's it again, just so you have it closer. Next slide. So all of this came about because I knitted a large scale American flag for Liberty State Park. My grandmother immigrated to America from Italy and sewed American flags for a living, and she immigrated through Ellis Island. And so I was touched when Art Fair 14C asked me to do an installation in the fall, and she was like, I would love for you to make something here. And immediately I thought of the flag. obviously because of Liberty State Park, but also because of my grandmother's journey, and she inspires me. And the flag originally was only supposed to be up for a couple of days, but it just fits so nicely in there. And it's funny, it's inserted a bit in the stairwell. I don't know if you can see, like the 13 stripes are wider at the bottom, but they go in at the sides. And that's because I had to make 13 stripes, right? But I think I was about a foot off, so I had to wrap them around the arms that the banisters that went down the stairwell, so you can still kind of see the red coming through. But it's so funny how, and I think from a stitching perspective, you can all appreciate when you're just a little bit off. You're just 1 inch over, and how it doesn't fit exactly, and that's what happened there. So it took a lot to make sure it was secured, and I didn't want it anymore. I didn't want to keep it down. And when I was installing it, so many people were stopping me and saying thank you and saying God bless you, and this is like, our country needs this now. And people who were getting married were standing in front of it, and I just knew that this was not mine anymore, that this was really what people needed. And so I gave it to them. And so in honor of me giving this to them, we're doing a stitch-in together, and that's how this all came about. And I couldn't be happier with waiting 10 years for this moment. And so during the stitch-in, all the tables will be in front of the flag, and we will be stitching together. And I think it's going to be a really special day. And I hope some of you can join. Next slide. So again, this is one of the first flyers. And so usually what I do when I do something like this, I create a lot of flyers. There's a lot of publicity. I'll have a virtual meetup for volunteers and people like that. And that's really just to get the word out. You can't just do one flyer. You have to have it, and you have to have like a social media campaign. This is the first flyer that went out. It went out about 2 weeks ago. We had a press release that went with it. We have a new flyer that just went out tonight. Liberty State Park put it together, and each of the partners have taken turns in contributing what they can. And if you are thinking about, the Guild is thinking about community engagement, finding partners is key, because they have resources that you do not. And finding a partner that has a similar mission, like has a giving spirit. Like Art Fair 14C's mission is to work with underrepresented artists, to bring them up front and to provide them with opportunities. And so we're aligned in that way, Woolpunk and Art Fair 14C. And then Liberty State Park is a park that's been threatened with turning into a golf course, or, and it's a park that's got a lot of gumption and a lot of people really love it. And I think the three of us together have such a good team effort going. And I would hope that when you think about doing your engagement programming, that you find people with a similar spirit who really want to give, because that's what makes a successful partnership and a successful program. Next slide. So sometimes I make the art first, and then the community happens second, or sometimes the community happens while I'm making the art. Next slide. So I made that tornado for Stockton University, but then somebody asked me what I was doing, and I was like, they were like, would you be interested in doing a performance piece with when we celebrate, we have like a DJ outside the PATH train? And I said, sure. So I took my knitting machine and I went outside, and the DJ was playing. It was a really cool scene, and it allowed people, I talked to people about what it is I was making, and I talked about the environment. And so community can happen, and you don't have to have a finished product. You don't have to have a program like the Give Me Shelter Project. It can be just about the happening that's happening. You know what I'm saying? And next to that is after I did the tornado, someone asked me if I would reinstall it outside their house. And, I just felt like I wanted the community, maybe community members who wouldn't see some art that night. And I had so many people come up and really like excited about art happening in their neighborhood. And so, you know, like community can happen in a bunch of ways if you're open to it and you think about it. Next slide, please. So the next two, and I'm going to wrap up after this, are similar in technique, but somewhat of some overlapping ideas that were from the Gimme Shelter project. So the Montclair Art Museum asked me to create a banner for their Lori stairwell. And this was recently, this was like in 2022. And I only had about 5 months to make the banner. And the banner, and I was already stitching on banners, so this was like an easy leap for me. There wasn't a lot of like, I already knew what I was going to do. But with every project that I do, or every art installation I do, I was trying to make a learning experience. And so, and try and push whatever I can to make it happen. So I asked the museum if they would do a donation collection for me of fibers, and they did. And actually, Sheila Hicks, if you know who she is, her artwork was in this box before mine. And so I was really honored that they gave me the Sheila Hicks box. And they made a sign, and they told their community, and we had so many clothes donated that I had to give 3 bags to the Salvation Army. It was crazy. People like, and this piece is all about building a circular community, about not letting the textiles go to waste. So between my studio scraps and what was collected from the museum, I took those pieces and stitched into a 13 by 30 foot banner for the Lori Wall stairwell at the Montclair Art Museum. Next slide. So the image, it was the middle of winter, and my images were low because of COVID. And I really wanted to make a connection of community and giving. And I had this picture. This isn't the exact picture that I used, but you can see the murals along the side behind the sunflowers. And this is a community garden in what I would refer to as a food desert in Jersey City. And I thought that this would be really, because really it's about land use, the piece, and about how textile waste creates a large amount of the landfills. I think it's something like 80% or something of landfills is clothing in New Jersey, I mean in the United States. But if you watch, there's a great film called Strachey, I think it's called, and it's a Netflix, and it's about how other countries have incorporated textile recycling into their everyday, so that they don't have the waste. Like in Italy, northern Italy, they actually have 3% of their waste is textile, and that's because they take the fibers and they recycle them. And there's a huge area that does that. I think it's Prato, if I'm not mistaken, and it's up in northern Italy. Some of these names I could be wrong with. I didn't study before this program, but Strachey is the name, and I think you'll love the film. And then they also talk about Africa and how Africa is up there and leading the world in upcycling. And so I wanted the photograph for our community donations to be community based. And that's how I named it Sunflowers and Graffitied Sky in the Garden State. And the Garden State is a play on the Garden State. New Jersey is called the Garden State. Next slide, please. So the banner was huge. And right where you are, look right where, is that the next slide? I thought there was a slide before that. No. Okay. Keep going. So right where these people are chatting is, okay, it's the following slide. I put a subliminal word. I sometimes, just when I get bored, I put subliminal words into my stitching. And so they're looking at something that says make things green. And I was hoping, like, Paul is Dead, the Beatles, you know how like it subliminally sinks into your head. I didn't want to make like a stamp that says make things green because some people are not environmentalists. I wanted to trick people into thinking that they need to make things green. And I don't know if it worked or not, but the whole play on it was kind of lovely. And if you could go to the next slide, I'll show you where I stitched it. You can kind of see it in the larger detail, but I marked it off where it says make things green. And you can see the make and the things in the slide to the right, the image to the right. I mean, I can see it. I don't know if everybody can see it, but I put the words in there and then I stitched over it. So it just kind of subliminally sunk in. Next slide. And, this goes over basically what happened. And I thought I'd take a moment and just read it to you, just some of it. New Jersey-based fiber artist Woolpunk has created art and community engagement projects that focus on homelessness and the environment I've done it for more than a decade. I missed that typo. It's probably almost 2 decades, but most notably, she worked with communities all over New Jersey to create DIY blankets for the homeless after Hurricane Sandy in 2014-15. Referencing her unique stitching and the use of fibers, she trademarked the name Woolpunk, which she's been using creatively since 2004. Sunflowers and Graffitied Sky in the Garden State is based on a photograph of community garden in the artist's hometown of Jersey City, New Jersey. For this project, Woolpunk partnered with MAM Community on a textile donation drive. The response was overwhelming, with donations of multiple bags of clothing, artist studio fabric scraps, and other reusable textiles. She layered and restitched and manipulated donated materials into the sunflowers banner. All items used were donated, all unused items were donated to the Salvation Army. This call to action brings attention to landfill waste, problems related to fast fashion, and our need as a community to work together to make better environmental choices. The artist sees herself as a stitching documentarian, and the project is an archive of textiles used by New Jersey residents. Noting that the majority of landfilled waste is comprised of clothing, Woolpunk remarked. The photo highlights inspirational communal land use and dietary wellness, but is contradicted by a spray painted sky blue mural that is visible from behind the sunflowers. The use of graffitied wall in the photo reminds us of the air polluted sunsets, which are so beautiful that they make us almost forget what causes them. Next slide, please. And then it was really hard to photograph it because it was so long and it was in the stairwell. Next slide. I have some more slides that show it from outside, which gives you a bigger view. The museum created a Flower Empowerment Woolpunk Day, and we had special guests, Susie Hicks, the climate chick. She came in and she read books and we watched her movie. I organized some recycling projects, and it was a really nice family day. We probably had over 300 to 400 people come. Next slide. This is a list of all the people, all the things that had happened, and it was a combination of watercolor sunflowers and family learning lab, the School of Rock, a local place that teaches music, played like kind of hippie music. So it was a great day. Next slide. Oh, those are just some pictures from the day. And I made everybody take an oath at the end of the day that they would be better environmentally friendly people. And the kids were really into it, but the parents were kind of like, I was like, you have to carpool to every game that you go to. And the parents were like, oh, Jesus. But the kids were really into it. I think the younger generations are really aware of what is happening and hopefully will continue to lead us in a better direction than we're in now. Next slide, please. So here it is. That's how big the piece is. I lost feeling in my finger permanently from stitching so much, but it was really worth it. Next slide. And this is a night view. This is probably one of my favorite slides of all the pieces, because you see it all, and looks really beautiful there for some reason. I know I'm probably not supposed to say that, but I just feel very happy about it. Next slide. So after this, I kind of got like a little, a little wind under my Woolpunk spirit, and thought I'd try for an artist residency in Italy. And with the same concept of having the town collect textiles, and me as just a vehicle to stitch and archive the textiles of the community, bringing awareness about textile waste, and as well as having something memorable that the community can look at and remember what it felt like to do good, right? So Padula is a beautiful town in southern Italy. I stayed at the Art Center Padula, and I proposed a project, like I said, and it was accepted. And I was there for 2.5 weeks. And Padula is not easy to get to. I went to Rome first, but you could go through Naples, and then took several trains, a driver that took 2.5 hours, and ended up in a town that had sites dating back to 500 AD. And the town is on a hill, so a lot of the streets are covered steps, and they're just very vertical, and only mini cars can get through it. It's really a beautiful place if you're ever in the area. It's below Naples and Amalfi Coast. Next slide, please. And I stayed in the ambassador's home to the Philippines. And that was my bedroom. And I lived on the top, the second floor. I had the whole second floor to myself. That's the leader of Art Center Padula, the director. And that was my studio. And that first room to the top left was haunted for sure. I had to run through it at night. I couldn't even stay in the room. There was so much crazy stuff happening. And I can tell you about that later if you're interested. I won't go through the talk right now. But next slide, please. And people gave a lot of beautiful fabrics, and like halfway through, I was like, I knew I wasn't going to keep it. I actually thought I wasn't going to keep it before I came to the residency. And then once halfway through, I was like, this is just going to stay. I'm not taking it. And, I'm partnered with a local photographer who's there, Mimo Treza, and he archives the town. And I asked for one of his photographs. I printed it in New York. I stuck it in my suitcase along with some like special remnants from my studio. And I brought it with me to Art Center Padula, because there wasn't, you couldn't just get Amazon to go there. You had to like leave the town and go to the local like shipping place. And so I carried my banner in my suitcase, and I stitched the entire time from morning to night to get this done. And when I told them that I was going to leave it, they were so sweet to me. They made a proclamation, they gave me flowers, and I was so touched. And now it's part of their collection. If you could show me the next slide. So this was the before, the photograph from Padula. And if you could show me the next slide. And this is the after. And that's it. That's me. I hope you enjoyed it.
That was great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We do have a couple of questions. I'm going to start with the gimme shelter questions that have come up. The first one is, have you had any issues with the Rolling Stones?
No, I don't think they know. I mean, there's actually, what's interesting is when I did that, I did it so long ago, and there's actually like a dog place now called Give Me Shelter or something. And so, yeah, I don't think they're after me. And
figured,
I'm
but-
not collecting any royalties. I make no money off it, so.
And then if people are interested in the meetup, is your website the best place to find information?
Yeah, actually, what I can do is I can send the link or the flyer to you guys. The virtual meeting is next week, just for people to find out more. Like, some people are curious, and then the actual event is March 10th, and I can send whatever information. You could just email me very easily, woolpunk@me.com. And I'm happy to get any of your emails. You can also look at Liberty State Park. They have tons of stuff, and the Art Fair 14C is dedicating a web page to it. So between the three of us, you should feel like good about, what's happening.
Okay. And then the other question is, the blankets that you've done with those projects, are they machine washable and dryable? Do you limit the materials used to make them more practical and durable?
So my prototype, I was hoping to I actually talked to somebody who had a connection at Anthropology, which is a clothing store, and I've tried on my own to get the prototype like more established, right? And I hear what you're saying. Like, in an ideal world, it would be easy to clean, but I don't have that much money, so like I couldn't do it all on my own. But this is a full circle, if just for 2 minutes, not to be like too narcissistic, but like, so my grandmother emigrated from Italy to America and sewed American flags for a living in a factory right down the street from the Montclair Art Museum that I did that project. Okay. So I didn't do any Give Me Shelter projects for like a while because I couldn't, it was an overwhelming experience. I loved every minute of it, but I didn't think it was sustainable. I mean, I was the one who was originally bringing the yarns to people and getting the blankets to people and picking up the blankets. And it was drowning me in a lot of ways. That I'm happy I did it, but like, the next time I do it, I want to do it right. It just so happens that the woman who runs Art Fair 14C knows the people who my grandmother worked for. And they run the flag company, and they've offered to give us the remnants so that we can create better blankets. And they know it's me. Like, they think they remember my grandmother.
Wow.
So, and I've never met them. I had no idea they even existed or knew my grandmother. And so we're working on that now. And my goal is to meet them and maybe even develop a prototype with them and I think it would be so great if it had like the flag aspect to it, that like America cares so much that like that's what's happening. But it's like one of the largest flag companies in the world. So the reason why I say this is because it's like, it takes a lot to like make something like this happen. If I had unlimited funds, or if I had gotten a grant for 25,000 or something, then yes, I could devote funds to make these blankets more durable. But for right now, I wanted something that, like, if somebody was in a bind, they could make something that represented themselves,
Mm-hmm. And then there's a couple of questions about the sunflower as well as the Italian piece, which the first one is it all piece quilted, or is it quilting over in a large photograph?
It's a bunch of things. It's, I wanted to use that piece from the photograph itself didn't have as many sunflowers as I wanted it to have. So we altered it a bit. It's not realistic. It's the image that I took, we played with, we put a filter on. So it's a doctored image. And then I also wanted even more sunflowers. So I printed some more sunflowers and then I stitched them on. So at the end, it looks like maybe it's all one piece, but there's many, many layers to it.
And then like what, I guess, stitching techniques do you use?
I'm Woolpunk. I just make it happen. I don't know. I don't have I mean like I was around growing up. I had all these people around me. My mother was sewing, my grandmother was crocheting, my other grandma was knitting, like my grandfather's sisters were lace makers, and all of this was happening around me. And much of this was being said in Italian, a language that I really didn't understand. But if I close my eyes, and you can ask, I can make almost anything, but I don't have any training. And I just think it's being around all these women, and I'm sure many of you are like me, that that you just see it and then you do it, and you just know naturally. I think it's a visual dictionary, stitching. I think if somebody were to read about knitting in a magazine and not knit themselves, would you really ever be able to pick it up? So much of it's by seeing and by doing. And I think I have memories even that are buried way back that I haven't even used yet. So that's how I make things happen. I don't even know, like a lot of times I think I'm mixing a lot of different techniques and stuff.
And is it predominantly hand stitching, or do you use the machine much?
Oh no, it's all hand stitched. My embroideries are all hand stitched. And like I said, I have this finger is like numb 90% of the day. Like I don't have any feeling in the top part anymore but I love it, and it makes me happy. So
And then Catherine said stitching is graffiti. And I think she also recommended the Boulder community knitting if we want to look into people to partner with locally.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And then Jane was curious if you could talk about the mass shooting pieces a little more.
Okay. So those really are not, there's not like an engagement aspect to that, but there is in a sense of learning, right? I feel like I think all of us, many of us, I don't know, I can't speak for everybody who's here, but struggle with the idea that children go to school and come home for senseless reasons. I'm assuming that most of us feel that way. I don't know, but that's how I feel. And so to make sense of that in my head, how we can have a society where children actually fear they're going to die in school, which it's happened over and over and over again. I'm not saying anything that hasn't happened. How do you make sense of that? And for me, it started with the mass stitchings. And I'm learning as I go. Like I said yesterday, I can't make a lot of because I get so into the research of what happened, and I read about the people, and some of them are very depressing. Like the Montclair post office was so depressing, that story. And, and I'm stitching and I'm thinking about that. And so I can't make them a lot. Like I have to take a break after I make them, because I have to try and think about the good in the world. And, but while I'm making them, I try to share with the community everything that I'm learning. And the next one will be Bernard Goetz, that from what I've read, because I got to a point where I was wondering, like, how did open carry laws become so normalized? And the Bernard Goetz situation in New York was from what I'm reading, is what opened up the open carry laws to be more open. And it really had helped change for the worse gun violence in America. And so that's my next deep dive, and I've already shot it. I already have the images, but I have to psychologically kind of get there. and I had the American flag to do in the fall. So I think after the Gimme Shelter project, I'm going to start the Bernard Goetz one, and you can follow me on Instagram if you want. You'll learn as I learn, and we just open a conversation about how to make gun violence awareness spread, and things like that. I mean, I don't really do that. That's really me just making work. I always I don't try and sell those. Those are not really sellable pieces. They usually get donated to like the Montclair Art Museum sold the first one, but that was for their auction to support them. And I just got a share of it, like a small share. And that's really just to help me buy supplies. And I donated the next one to the Eileen Kaminsky Foundation, and they've had it up ever since I donated it. And the third one, the post office, I still own, I still have it. But if there was an opportunity where it could go somewhere, and locally, I kind of want the stitchings to stay in the community that I'm referencing.
And I did go ahead and put your website and Instagram in the chat.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
And those are all the questions I had. So I think if it makes sense, I'll hand it over to Jane. And I don't know how much time we have, but we might be able to have a discussion and unmute people, but that's not my decision.
Okay.
Say if the group, it's 8:12 here, so that means it's after 10 your time in New Jersey. Do anybody want to talk, or should we say thank you, wonderful, and move on?
No pressure.
Yes. Okay, everybody do your thank you so much.
You're welcome so much.
Yeah. We will
Yeah,
I
it's beautiful and
yes.
so interesting.
Yes. I'll include my thanks on behalf of all of the Evening Guild members and participants. That very inspiring. We definitely have some amount of, well, we're working on our community engagement for the whole guild.
Yeah. Well, and
currently.
her comment is that this is for them, not for us. That really struck home, because we're out doing stuff. We're doing it because we like to show what we know how to do, but to keep remembering it's for the recipients or the students or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I really appreciated your whole perspective and enjoyed both presentations very much. I felt a lot of kinship with your endeavor in many ways. I won't go into it all, but very appreciative for what you do at Woolpunk.
I
Yeah.
love that you said that. Thank you.
I would like to add to what Catherine said also, that not only were you inspiring, Woolpunk, but I was moved tonight with how generous you are to your community. Like, you moved me. And if we could do just a small portion for our community of what you've done for your communities in New Jersey, we will feel that we've had some success. You are one of those stitching earthbound angel people. And your community is so lucky to have you. And thank you so much for sharing your inspiration tonight and bringing tears to my eyes.
Oh my goodness. Thank you. I just think that I'm like a bit of a Pollyanna. Like, I'm like, people want to be good, and people want to do good. And if you just, I hate to be like cheesy, but like, if you just build it, people will come. I mean, it's so funny because working with Liberty State Park and our 514C, they're like, I hope people come. I'm like, I did this all on my own the first time, and it like was like crazy, like people will come, it's people are looking for real connections. They're looking to be good people. And if you give people the opportunity, I really do think most people stand up and say, yes, I want to help, you know, but there's not a lot of, sometimes there's just not a lot of opportunity. There's not the avenue. And originally, like I said, with the Gimme Shelter Project, I was shocked. I mean, I had no idea. I couldn't stop. It was like everybody just kept giving and giving and giving. And it was something that I just loved to be a part of. It wasn't even like I was leading it. It was just like everybody was doing it. And I just was making sure it was getting done, following everybody behind. And that's, you know, that's really what this is all about, you know, is giving everybody, you know, just filling the place with love. You know, and I think that's what we all do when we stitch, right? We stitch with love.
Right.
I wanted to ask real quick if you could just spend a moment telling us about the haunted room.
Oh,
A little more
yeah.
about the haunted room.
Yes. So I come from a long line of stregononas, Italian witches. And my grandmother used to read tea leaves. And so I always kind of like, I lived on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. I could always kind of feel sometimes when a place may have some extra people in it. And I don't like think of myself as like a psychic or anything like that, but I just can feel it. And I didn't really know what this was when I was like younger or anything like that. But I've been in enough scenarios now that I just kind of can trust it. So the first night I was there, I got like the heebie-jeebies when I walked through that room, the green room that I showed you. And the house is really old, like it's super old. And everywhere else I was fine, except for that one room. And I couldn't even walk through it. Like at night, I had to have the light on. And I was like, I should get control of yourself. You're like not this young kid. Like there's nothing wrong with this room. No matter how much I tried to convince myself, I finally told the art director, I said, something is up with that green room. I can't take it. I can't even walk through it. And she goes, I'm going to have you talk to the caretaker of the home. And of course he spoke Italian. And I was still trying to like identify so like what exactly I was feeling. So we sat down one night outside, and it's a small town with a piazza and like, of course, a coffee shop. And so we're sitting there and she's translating what I'm saying to him. And I'm like, it's not my bedroom and it's not the room that when you first come out, but it's that green room that you walk through. I'm like, I just feel like there's all these eyes on me. And he started laughing. And he was like, yeah, he's like, the room faces the cemetery that we had to dig up and we had to move. And I was like, oh my God, because she even said to me, she goes, if it gets too hot in here, you can open all the windows. And in my stomach was a big, like, no, like, that is not, like, I cannot handle that. And so, you know, I don't know. It was really like super intense, that room. But anyway, so. I thought I should do that. Anyway, you guys are lovely. I really enjoyed speaking with you. Thank you so much.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you
Thank you
for
again.
joining
so
us.
much.
You have a bunch of new Boulder fans now, Woolpunk.
Great. That's good to know. And
Yes.
hopefully I see some of you at the virtual meetup or even on March 10th. We'd love to have you tuned in.
All right. Thank you. Good night.
Yeah, I'm going to head out. Good night. Take
Good
care.
night.
Good night. Good night.
We'll transition to show and tell.